The morning carried that deceptive calm that always seems to come before something monumental. My family's old hunting cabin, tucked deep in the California pines, was never meant for moments like this. But today, it had become the nerve center of the most ambitious federal investigation into suburban corruption in state history. Across the oak table sat Robert Grant, the state attorney general, whose relentless dismantling of criminal HOA networks had earned him the nickname the Terminator in certain circles. His dark eyes were sharp, dissecting every line of evidence spread before us. Contracts, inspection certificates, bank statements, each one another nail in the coffin of a sprawling criminal empire hiding behind the facade of neighborhood management. I had been dragged into this world 6 months earlier, when my cabin became the target of fabricated violations and harassment. What began as annoyance had grown into a revelation, an organized enterprise siphoning millions through fake construction projects, false environmental reports, and rigged land deals. Somewhere between fending off threats and gathering proof, I'd gone from victim to key witness. The irony wasn't lost on me. A former state building inspector, once chasing code compliance, now standing in the crosshairs of something that felt more like mob territory than suburban governance. Grant tapped a finger on one of the forged permits, his voice calm but heavy with certainty. Nathan, this isn't just HOA overreach. What you've uncovered is a criminal network operating with impunity, protected by officials who've been bought and paid for. This is organized crime. The words were still echoing when the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the silence. Through the cabin's narrow window, I caught sight of a white pickup rolling toward us with arrogant purpose. On its side, magnetic signs flashed some official-sounding nonsense. My stomach tightened. The timing was too perfect. Moments later, the door burst inward. Karen Morrison, the self-styled HOA president, stormed in as if she owned the world, reflective safety vest blazing orange, a fat folder clutched in her hands. Two men trailed behind her. Marcus Reed, a slick compliance advisor in a charcoal suit, and Jimmy, silent and grim behind a professional-grade camera. I knew their type before they opened their mouths. This was theater, intimidation dressed as law. Karen's voice rang out, loud and rehearsed, rattling off urgent violations and community safety hazards. Reed followed, layering on technical jargon and obscure codes meant to drown any homeowner in fear. Jimmy's camera recorded every second, feeding their arsenal of coercion. For them, this was routine. For me, it was the moment the predator walked straight into the lion's den. I leaned back, letting the golden badge on the table do the talking. It caught a beam of sunlight, flashing like a silent warning. Karen's eyes landed on it, and her confident stride faltered. Then her gaze slid to the man across from me. Recognition hit her like a punch. Like a punch. Robert Grant didn't need to move or speak. His reputation filled the room. The color drained from her face, her bravado crumbling in real time. Reed, oblivious, kept droning through his script, citing Environmental Protection Act violations that had no bearing on my grandfather's old cabin. I let him dig his own grave a little deeper before cutting in, my tone cool and precise. Mr. Reed, I spent 15 years enforcing building codes for the state. This cabin was grandfathered under the 1987 standards you're citing. And for the record, demanding documentation under false pretenses falls under Penal Code 148.5, filing false reports. You might want to double-check your script. His words stuttered, confidence evaporating. Beads of sweat shone on his forehead. Karen looked stricken, but tried to salvage the act. This is a routine inspection, she stammered, clutching her folder tighter. Grant's voice cut through the tension, smooth as a scalpel. Miss Morrison, Nathan here isn't just a citizen defending his property. He's a former inspector. And you've just walked into an active investigation. The room froze. I could almost hear her mind shattering under the weight of it. I decided to twist the knife. Gesturing toward the corner, I said, "By the way, this entire interaction has been live streaming to the Attorney General's office." Her eyes snapped to the tiny camera, horror dawning as the realization struck. Every threat, every false claim, every word had been captured, recorded, and transmitted. She fumbled her phone from her pocket, dialing frantically. "David, it's Karen. I need you to fix this, now." Her voice cracked with desperation. She believed her county contact, Commissioner Walsh, had always been her shield. What she didn't know was that Walsh had been wearing a wire for 18 months, feeding every word of their conversations to the feds. Grant, patient as ever, slid a sealed envelope across the table. "We received some interesting materials this morning," he said, opening it to reveal contracts and financial documents. Karen's signature leapt off the pages, tying her directly to fraudulent land deals, shell companies, and embezzled millions. Her knees buckled as she stared, how realization colliding with dread. Reed bolted, abandoning his briefcase as he fled for the tree line. Jimmy scrambled after him, camera bouncing. Neither got far. Federal agents had been waiting in the woods, ready for flight. Within minutes, both were dragged back in handcuffs, mud staining Reed's once immaculate suit. Karen, cornered and unraveling, tried to cling to her script. "This is a misunderstanding," she insisted, voice trembling. "I'm a community leader." "Save it." I cut her off. "Right now, you're giving live testimony in a federal investigation." Her face crumpled. The predator who had built a career on intimidation now looked like prey. Then came the sound of engines, low and menacing, as a convoy of black SUVs rolled into view. Federal agents poured out, weapons holstered, but movements sharp, efficient. The cabin filled with the gravity of the moment. Karen's world collapsed with every step they took. Grant delivered the final blow himself. "Miss Morrison, you're being charged under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. What you've been running isn't just a corrupt HOA, it's a criminal enterprise." Her mouth opened in protest, but the clink of handcuffs cut her short. Agents read her rights, while others cataloged the evidence on the table. She was escorted outside, head bowed, the orange vest that once symbolized her false authority now glowing like a cruel joke under the sun. The operation spread far beyond my cabin. Simultaneous raids swept through 4 counties, seizing documents, freezing bank accounts, and arresting every member of Karen's network. Over $2.3 million was recovered, destined to return to the homeowners who'd been bled dry by her schemes. 6 months later, the story had reached its inevitable conclusion. Karen pleaded guilty to 18 felonies, including RICO conspiracy, mail fraud, and money laundering. 15 years in federal prison. Reed received 8, stripped of his law license forever. Walsh's cooperation earned him leniency, but his career was ashes. For me, the fight didn't end at the cabin. My knowledge of codes and my role as witness pulled me into the heart of reform. California passed the HOA Accountability Act, mandatory audits, background checks for board members, and whistleblower protections that ensured no one else would be trapped the way I had been. I joined the new state HOA Reform Commission, turning the nightmare into purpose. The cabin, once my sanctuary, was declared a historic site. Not for its architecture, but for the day justice struck at the heart of organized suburban crime. Sometimes visitors come, curious about the place where a so-called community leader's empire collapsed. I prefer the quiet, but I don't mind when they ask. The truth deserves to be remembered. I've often been asked what the real lesson was. It isn't just that Karen was punished, or that millions were returned. It's simpler and far more powerful. Knowledge of the law is the ultimate equalizer. Documentation is the weapon, and when those who believe they're untouchable finally face the light, the truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be recorded. That's what brought Karen Morrison down, and that's what will always bring people like her down.